Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. I'm Lyndall Stout. Joining us for our roundtable this year are Kim Anderson, our crops marketing specialist, Daryl Peel, livestock marketing specialist, and Larry Sanders, our ag policy specialist. Gentlemen, welcome and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Now, Larry, you have been busy getting some presents ready for us.
Yeah, these were left under the tree, and I didn't feel quite right opening them all at home, so I brought them with me to share with everybody. And I don't know what's in them, but we can talk about them here.
Some topics of discussion, hopefully.
Yeah, this gift is from the markets, and the markets are giving us lower net farm income.
So, in general, to start off our discussion this morning, let's kind of recap 2015 and kind of what farm income levels were and some of the challenges that producers faced, and then we'll kind of divide up the discussion. Larry, if you want to start.
Sure. You know, since the year 2000, we've seen an upswing in net farm incomes, and as a matter of fact, we've just coming off of a couple of really great record years. But we saw the stage being set for more dismal news in that area as we started looking at the price picture and some other adverse events that we'll be talking about a bit later.
Now, we know that definitely held true for grain folks. Talk about that, Kim.
Well, you can look at wheat prices. Of course, they started down. They peaked out in 2012. They were lower in 2013, lower in 14, and of course, a level to lower in 15. Corn prices, the same. They were low in 14 and 15. So and soybean prices held relatively high. You know, up $10 or better coming in 13 and 14, and finally they broke in 15. They're lower. Canola prices were definitely lower. And cotton prices, you had one little rally in them throughout the last 4 or 5 years, and they're back lower. So prices have definitely led to lower income. Now, the salvation, you can look at production in the crops. If you go back to 2014, we finished that year with wheat, a significantly low crop. Thank goodness for your policy and crop insurance that bailed the wheat producers out there, and also cotton producers with the droughts that we've had the last couple of years, and that kept your income higher there. So what we've seen in crops is declining prices as we came from the peaks we saw in 2012.
And then in terms of the cattle markets, it wasn't a bad year, but not the same as the year before.
You know, 2015 was a year of transition. You can kind of think of it in two halves. The first half was kind of coming off of the extraordinary run we had at the end of 2014, record high prices, way above what anybody really anticipated. And we were above year-over-year levels through the first half of the year. The second half of the year, then kind of reality set in. We adjusted back down fairly sharply at the end of the year. There were some fundamentals that were part of it, but a lot of it is just kind of the market transitioning and psychology from this long bullish market we've been in to the reality that we are beginning to build cattle numbers. Beef production will be going up. Really hasn't done it much yet, but an awful lot of change in the market. So at the end of the year, we were in a very different environment than where we started the year, and that sort of sets the stage for where we go from here.
Let's open another present. Daryl, do you want to do the honors?
Sure. I'll take a look at one. Let's see what we have here. From foreign countries, sluggish economies.
Okay.
You know, that's in terms of the livestock markets, that's been one of the challenges through this, is we've seen a trade situation that was, you know, beef in particular, exports have struggled. Actually, all of the meats have struggled a bit as a result of some concerns in terms of global economy. A lot of concern earlier in the year about the Chinese market, the stock market shocks there, and those have impacted the livestock side in that respect.
And I know, Kim, we've talked to you a lot about foreign situations. Give us your perspective.
Well, as far as the economies goes, it had a minor impact on the grains. I think your export demand, for the most part, held relatively high, and probably because of the lower prices. You compare to what they were paying for the wheat or the corn or the beans in 2012 to what they were paying this year in 15, with significantly prices half as high as high as they were earlier. I think the low prices really helped those countries, and our exports were up. So I don't think the lower economies, of course, they had some impact on our demand, but not the major impact you've seen on some other goods and services.
And Larry, you can speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, you know, China is kind of the 800-pound gorilla on the block we've talked about year in and year out. But I think that no one really knows just how bad a shape they're in right now because statistics are so doctored by the government there. But it's clear that they have declined. They have been in the top 3 of our markets consistently over the last several years, joining Canada and Mexico. And I think we can count on Canada doing okay during this time period. China is a question mark, and Mexico to a lesser extent. So it's another one of those red flags to say caution for this period of time.
Just kind of keep on the radar. Quickly, let's open one more present. Kim, do you want to do the honors, and we'll start the discussion at least?
Stronger dollar.
Oh, that is right up your alley.
Oh yeah, I was sitting here thinking about that on the economies. The dollar, if you look at the index of the value of the dollar, it's went from really down around 70 points up to it hit $1 in the last couple of weeks. The impacts, say wheat, is probably anywhere from $1.25 to $1.50 higher price on the export market, speaking relative to the other, say, competing countries, Canada, European Union, Australia, Argentina. It's had an impact. The world wheat price, it probably hasn't impacted that much. However, the U.S. wheat price, it's definitely had an impact on it. It's probably $1 lower, along with corn or probably your livestock, Darrell.
Absolutely. You know, again, as a part of that trade picture, the strong dollar really exaggerated the beef market conditions that we've faced. High prices already in the U.S. contribute, and then add the strong dollar to it, made our exports very expensive to foreign customers, really impacted the exports. By the same token, in reverse, it's really enhanced our imports the last 2 years. 2014 and 2015, we've seen a large increase in beef imports. And so, again, the strong dollar has played a big role in that, both directly with our trade as well as indirectly in terms of our trade and other countries' trade around the world.
And Larry, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's some people kind of wonder what's wrong with a strong dollar that says America's strong. But the irony is that when our dollar is strong, it makes our commodities more expensive to the rest of the world, relatively speaking. And as Kim was saying, how much the change has been, and you go back 7 to 10 years, and we have increased the index value of the dollar 50%. So that's got to have an adverse impact on prices. We were beginning to really eat away with the trade deficit, and we've kind of moved sideways, or maybe even increasing the trade deficit recently because of this problem.
Lyndall, let me come on another side of that strong dollar. On the other hand, though, it's made our equipment cheaper, it's made our fuel, oil, and lube cheaper, it's made our fertilizer and some of our chemicals. It's lowered our cost of production. So, yes, it's had a price impact, and I would say price impact trumps cost impact, but there are some positive factors to that higher dollar value.
Okay, great discussion. We'll continue it shortly, but first let's check in with Glenn Selk for Cow-Calf Corner.
Today on the Cow-Calf Corner, I want to bring you up to date on some relatively new research that I think has some importance for those cow-calf operations that are going to retain ownership of the calves into and through the feedlot. And even for those cow-calf operations that routinely sell to the same customers year after year. And what I'm referring to is some data that comes from Iowa State University, where they looked at the impact of internal parasites of calves as they arrived at the feedlot. What they did was took a set of calves and individually checked fecal egg counts to see how high the worm load was. They basically divided the calves into the two groups. Those that they said had a pretty high worm load according to the fecal egg counts, and those that they put into the low category. After they'd checked them, then they dewormed all of the calves. And they went back and checked the fecal egg counts 24 days later, and the deworming worked very, very well. All of them had low egg counts. But as they followed those two groups of calves through the feedlot, they found some pretty important differences. First of all, those calves that came in with the high internal parasite concentrations were the ones that were most likely to have some disease problems. They were treated, a higher percentage of them were treated, and more of them had repeat treatments. That resulted in treatment costs being 4 times as high for the calves that came into the feedlot with a high intensity of parasites compared to their counterparts that were much cleaner. As they followed those calves through the feedlot, there was no real difference in rate of gain, feed efficiency, or even hot carcass weight, and yield grades of the cattle were similar. But there was a real difference showed up in marbling score. Those calves that came in that had lower amounts of internal parasites had higher marbling scores, therefore had a much better chance to grade choice or perhaps even certified Angus beef, if that be their goal, than did the calves that came into the feedlot with higher worm loads. So if I have an operation where I'm going to send some calves on and retain ownership to the feedlot, I'm going to make sure that those calves have been dewormed before they leave my place. They're clean going into that feedlot. And even if I'm selling to the same customer year after year, I'm going to do the same thing so that he is getting along better with these calves with lower health problems, higher grades as they come out on the rail, and he's going to be a happier customer that's going to be more willing to come back and buy my calves in the future. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
We're continuing our discussion with Kim, Daryl, and Larry, and now it's my turn to open a present. So I always like to do that. And this is from the oil companies, cheap oil and natural gas. Why don't you give us your thoughts on this situation?
What could be wrong with low gas prices? All of us go to the pump and fill up, and it's good news every time it happens. And I think it's really a mixed bag, especially for Oklahoma, because so many farmers, landowners out there also get lease checks, royalty checks from these folks, and those are problematic now. So some of them also work in the oil patch, and they've lost their checks here toward the end of the year because of low oil and gas prices. So it's a good deal for cost of production, but the other side of the story is probably not all that good a news for Oklahomans.
A lot of these small communities, I think, are very concerned about the regional economic impacts of the unemployment that's happened recently with the downturn in oil prices.
And then that translates, of course, to the farm, and we've talked a lot about grain prices being sort of dismal, to say the least. Kim, how do we wind down 2015?
Well, as you look at the oil and gas and the prices and where we are, I think we're ending 2015 with more product in the bin than we would have had if we hadn't had at one time the high oil and gas prices, because the royalties, the drilling, those checks, oil and gas checks coming in the mailbox have put some producers into position where they didn't need the income, and they came into harvest, prices were relatively low. I don't care which one of the crops you're looking at. They had that oil and gas income. Even with the lower prices, they've got some coming in, so they can store that product longer waiting for these prices to recover. So I think we've seen that impact our markets to a certain degree, and they will continue to impact as we look forward.
On the cattle side, it seems to me that, you know, where we end 2015 here, I think really sets the stage for 2016. Again, 2015 was a year of transition. So we're at a different place now than we started the year, but I think we've been through a lot of that. Perhaps the worst of it in terms of the difficulty of making that transition hopefully is behind us. We've had an awful lot of market volatility. It's not clear yet whether all of that will pass, but hopefully we get past some of that as well as we go forward. Looking at, you know, we continue with herd expansion, and that's going to go on, but we've kind of adjusted the price side of this thing to the reality here that we are going to be working our way into lower prices as we go forward.
Okay, let's open the next president and start the discussion, Daryl.
All righty. Let's see what we have here. We have from the federal government, large federal deficit. Larry, I'm going to pitch that one back to you.
Well, I think it's a point of cussing and discussing that we continue to spend too much money at the federal level. Again, though, there's this two-edged sword on this, because probably one of the things that helped prop up the economy in the short term after 2008 was significant federal spending fueling the economy. But there's no surprise here, no secret that we are now looking at a situation where people are really wanting to begin paring back this situation. So if this happens with some other things at play in the economy, we could begin to see a tightening in the economy here as we move into a new year.
Let me react to that just a little bit on this government spending. You know, we go back a couple years, we had inflationary fears, you know, what you kept hearing, we're going to, and the commodities, investment in the commodities is a good hedge against inflation. And I think we saw the funds, you know, Daryl, you and I were talking about this last September-October period, about $5 billion coming out of the commodities. And so I think what we've seen with our commodities is the money moving out of them. And I think that comes back to, right now there may not be the inflationary fears that we had a year or two ago. I think that's impacted our prices, and I think that's going to be something that we probably need to look at as we move forward.
Well, I think also the best news perhaps farmers got at the end of 2015 was that Congress is willing to stick with supporting farmers with farm programs. It looked like they were going to renege on their promise with crop insurance, and they passed a transportation budget bill and made sure that they restored that, maintained that. So here we have a Congress that is talking about cutting budgets, but they said they were going to stick with farmers.
And that's got to be good news all the way around, right, Daryl?
It helps to add some stability in a situation where there's an awful lot of uncertainty. As Kim said, the decline in commodities has not only affected ag commodities directly, but gold prices, oil prices, obviously, are all part of that same complex, and it does play a big role in what we see in the markets right now.
Okay. We'll continue our discussion in just a moment here at the Ranchers Club, but first let's check in with our friends at the Mesonet.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet Weather Report. Thanks for joining us as we welcome in our new year, 2016. We're going to take a look at some of last year's weather that will impact us as we begin this new year. Last year had record-setting rainfall. Our first map shows how much spring rain we received above average for March, April, and May in 2015. McAllister had 23.5 inches above average for those spring months. All of the rain in the extremely dark green areas promoted lots of plant growth. Now, as we look ahead to Oklahoma's March fire season, we will have a huge amount of dead fuel that can feed large fires. Our air temperatures last fall came in 2 degrees above average over the months of September, October, and November for much of the state. And that above average air temperature trend continued into December. A warm winter speeds up wheat maturity. For those who want to pull cattle off of wheat, they'll want to start checking the Mesonet Wheat First Hollow Stem Advisor early this year. Now here's Gary with January to March outlooks.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful holiday season. We're off to a new year, a great start, I hope. So let's take a look at what we have for January and also the next few months. Now, this outlook for precipitation for January from the Climate Prediction Center shows increased odds of above normal precipitation over the western 2/3 of the state, especially the western half of the state where the odds are a little bit greater. Now, when we go out a little bit further than that and go for the January through March time period, we see about that same pattern, increased odds for a number of above normal precipitation for most of the state. We see no chances, at least according to the Climate Prediction Center, for the development of drought, which is certainly a wonderful bit of news indeed. Well, we hope to see you next week. That's it for this time, and we'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
As we sort of wind down today, we want to look ahead at what some of the trends may be for 2016. And Kim, if you'll do the honors with the next gift, please.
And we got it from the Fed, and it's called interest rates.
Terrific. Larry, you want to tackle this one?
Why not? You know, it's been fascinating to watch the economy. The Federal Reserve System has been the driver, I think, for the last decade with monetary policy, and we've had the lowest interest rates ever. And we're starting our second decade of low interest rates, but we're going to begin to move up in interest rates, and we have seen our lowest interest rates for a while. So it's going to have lots of impact on agriculture and the general economy. Farmers are going to see their cost of production go up somewhat because of increasing interest rates. If they want to get borrowed capital, they are going to want to get it sooner rather than later. And if they've got variable rate loans out, they probably want to begin to pay them off sooner rather than later.
And in terms of 2016 trends, how does all this translate to cattle?
Well, again, you know, we've turned the corner now. Cattle numbers are growing. Beef production started to grow at the end of 2015 and will continue to grow in 2016. So over time, there will be that supply side pressure. Supplies have drove prices to record high levels previously, and that's going to be the major driver over time of prices coming down. Again, I don't think there's as much volatility potentially in the market in 2016. You know, interest rates is one of those factors. Once we turn the corner and begin increasing interest rates, there's a certain amount of dread of making that decision, but once it's in place, I think the market will absorb that. The strong dollar will play a big role in how our trade picture. It should start improving next year. We expect to see less beef imports and probably modest increase in beef exports, but again, that's going to hinge on things like the strength of the dollar as we go forward. So, you know, producers, having made the adjustment we did at the end of 2015, we're looking for modest declines in prices in 2016, but probably not the level of uncertainty that we had at the end of 2015.
Will this translate to the crops markets too, Kim, you think?
Oh, I think it will. If you look at the interest rates as they go up, and we've got low prices, I believe that means the producers are, most producers are going to have to borrow more money for their production. That's going to increase the cost just to a certain degree. As you look at the prices of where they are now in the crops, I think they're all just about on the bottom. I think there's a lot more upside potential than there is downside risk. Can they go down some? Yes, but I believe wheat, corn, soybeans has probably got the most downside potential. Canola's already down. Sorghum, of course, follows the corn. But as we look out into 16, 17, and 18, interest rates are probably going to go up, and those interest rates are going to have impacts on our costs. Also, I think we need to bring in there inflation, and if you get inflation, because we do have the high debt, I think there's going to be inflationary pressures. I think that could be positive for our prices because I believe it'd bring back in that outside money into the commodities. They'd be buying the commodities to insure against that inflationary pressures to a certain degree, and I think that could be positive for prices. But I remember what Luther Tweeden told me in 1983. He said, policy comes and policy goes, Larry, but weather determines price.
That's for sure. Let's open the last present of the day. And this is more dysfunction in Washington, D.C. Could we possibly be talking about an election year, Larry?
No doubt about it. If nothing else, we're going to have lots of entertainment coming out of the presidential congressional campaigns this year. I think that we admittedly have had serious problems with dysfunction in Washington, and I think that's probably only going to increase as we go through this. After the elections, things may settle down, but candidates are all over the board in both parties, and we'll see many suggestions about what to do to cut the deficit and change the value of the dollar and fight off interest rates going up, but they won't get much done in Washington.
Your thoughts, Kim?
Well, I come to mind of what just happened in Argentina. They just elected a new president. The president campaigned for farm votes, saying that he would do away with the export tax on soybeans, corn, and wheat. That's a 35% tax doing away with on beans. That's a 25% tax doing away with on corn, a 23% tax doing away with on wheat. And I go back to a book, a biography that was written in 1903. And it had ended up this cattleman that had built this 300,000 acre ranch down in Texas. And he says, I built my empire on mismanaged government programs, and I suffered my greatest loss at the change in administration. So I think, Larry, I think we've got to look, there will be changes, we just don't know what they're going to be.
And Daryl, some final thoughts?
Well, again, the election year itself means that there's a lot of entertainment is the word Larry used. There'll be a lot of noise, a lot of things kicked around. Probably not much gets done, but as Kim said, I think it is important. It does have an impact over time, depending on what happens. It certainly will have an impact on our market, so it's something producers have to be prepared for whatever changes come.
And luckily, we have all of you guys to help us navigate through this. So thank you very much for a great discussion this morning, great presents to get everything rolling, and as is tradition for our roundtable show, let's kind of raise a glass. I can't quite clink with everyone, but Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And thanks so much to all of you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on SUNUP.